So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Linda?
Yep.
Bert?
Second. Yes.
Jill?
Yes.
Brooke?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Okay, aye. Okay, we're gonna start back. We got just for the record, you all got an email, I think, with the quarterly reports.
Yep.
Okay. And in going over the quarterly reports, and I only went over one so far, I think I'm going to ask that we talk about the quarterly reports at our next meeting, and that because there were a couple of the budgets that came in that didn't line up properly. So I'm going to ask that I'm going to have Anne send out a request for the budgets to be relooked at in the quarterly reports.
Okay.
Okay. And then we'll put that, but Anne, we'll put that on the agenda for our next meeting. Hey, I see Anne's eyes for the first time.
I was watching the top of her head before.
Yeah, me too, but I saw her eyes. I see her glasses. Okay, so we had been in a discussion about the Interfaith Council when we went off last time. And I do have a question for everybody as we go forward. How comfortable is everybody with finishing, these deliberations on some of these before you've actually gone to your site visits or had questions that might come up via the site visits?
I'm fine because we've been down this road before, so.
We have, but Jill and Brooke have never, this is a first time for them. I think sometimes we have a lot of questions that come up at these that, when answered, can give us a better understanding of some of the programs.
Whatever decisions we make can always be readjusted though. So this is sort of like the CPC, we do a preliminary shot at stuff and then we go back and start adjusting.
Okay, I'm just asking.
Did it work?
Yes, it did.
So Dorothy,
sorry.
Go ahead, Jill.
I was just going to say, I appreciate what Brooke said the other day because, we are trying to be realistic about what we can and can't do. And so, I think everything has to be looked at as something that might not be fully funded. And I don't know. I don't know how to totally look at all that. If I'm just trying to be realistic. So it's hard for me. What I'm saying is it's hard for me to sit there and say, sure, we'll give you money. We'll give you money. We'll give you money. We're going to go back and be like, no, we're not giving you the full amount. I don't know. I think it's sort of I understand wanting to endorse what they're doing, but we can't endorse them 100. We can't endorse all of them 100% at their funding level.
Correct. We never have endorsed absolutely everybody at their funding level.
We've never had enough money to endorse everybody.
At their funding level.
Yeah, if only, right? So I would say I am pretty familiar with all of these programs. Just because I've been out and about in this arena for a while now. So I feel a little more comfortable. I think really now it's a math question, like as much as it is a quality question for any particular piece of any of these programs. I think the math doesn't add up. So making qualitative decisions and quantitative decisions simultaneously is our job. So it's going to be, they're all worthy. What's a higher priority is the bottom line. So
I don't think we've ever not funded people, except for like something like Gosnold who's dropping out. We have cut all over the place, but everybody gets a piece of the pie kind of thing. We've never said you don't get anything.
Right. No, that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying within each request, there are pieces of each request that when we talked about it designating exactly what we are funding, and whether we're going to select pieces of an organization's application to eliminate funding for, or whether we just do it, you know, if we end up doing it across the board, we're going to fund you 80% or 90% of all your programs, or, you know, those kind of things. So
we have done that. We have done that with the last one I think I participated in was ASAP, where we didn't fund a particular thing, but we funded the other stuff. So we have cherry picked out of their requests for sure.
Yeah, but not all of them. And I think that's one of the things we're being asked to is to clarify better for the town of Nantucket what we're actually funding, what organizations we're funding. And I think that that's important. I think one of my concerns comes up, everybody, is that I will admit that out of everything, I'm very good at the information, the mathematics for me on looking over your our budgets proposed to us or funding requests has always been a stumbling block. But when I'm finding stuff that I'm not having anybody else on the board ask me about, it's upsetting to me. I looked over, because we were working on the fuel assistance, if you look at what was given to us in FY 2020, maybe their numbers on the bottom will jive on total income, but they're not carried over to dates. So when we're looking at information from everybody, is everybody looking at these finances the way we're supposed to be as to how it's actually going? So I'm a little bit concerned about that as we're funding everybody, that how much effort has been put in to looking at all of the budgets put in front of us. Because if we look at what's attached to the grant process for fiscal year 2020, we look at what they have, you can go to actual to dates, you go to the bottoms line up, but if you go to total to dates, there are numbers missing, and there were numbers missing in our quarterly report as well. And I have found this with a few of our grants. This is one of the bigger ones. We seem to find it every year. Maybe their numbers total up in certain places, but we've had to request that items be relooked at. As I'm re-looking at them, I might run $1 million project, you know, every year, but I'm telling you that these numbers here don't jive.
Talking about the fuel assistance or anybody else?
Well, this one in particular, I was still working on when we went through so I'm asking, like, I've looked for assistance to go through the hospital now, and I'm working to look at each and every one of these, which is, I guess, in hindsight, I've always tried to oversee it and understand them, but it's all the other variables that I look and do research on, is what programs have been offered, what things have been offered, what's going on.
Hospital has always been very difficult.
Yeah.
The hospital one, it's a huge thing to oversee and to look at each detail and to understand. And as we've tried to get it, maybe it's become more corporate for us than it was before. You know, and we finally got the Fair Winds one, and Fair Winds is looking pretty good, but I still have to, you know, I'm being honest with everybody. I haven't seen, I think that there's things that I've found that I feel like, why am I the only one finding these things, guys? And why am I the only one asking these questions? And our job is we're overseeing tax money that we're giving to people, and we can all believe in the organizations. I, for one, have believed in all these organizations. That's why I'm here. And that's why I'll stand up and fight for it on town floor or anywhere else. But I also have to say, when I sit in front of everybody, be confident enough that when they ask me a question, you're getting the answer that I know is a valid answer. I have never presented anything on behalf of the Contract Review Committee that I haven't known to be 100% correct. And I have challenged when I need to challenge, because that's my job. My job is to be the mouth sometimes that asks the questions that maybe people don't want to hear. But that's so that when somebody from the other side asks me a question, I can answer it with confidence that I know exactly what I did And I know that we maybe have only a $650,000 budget compared to everything else in the town, but that $650,000 makes the difference between human services providers providing their services and not being able to in some instances. So I'm asking everybody to take the time, and it's not just because you believe in something, but we have to know that when they're presenting us something, these numbers jive. You know, I got sent a Facebook post yesterday that is one of the most disturbing posts I've ever seen, which I actually sent to Anne, and I think she can send everybody, of somebody that has up food that they got from the food pantry, and they're saying free food because they don't eat it. It's not their kind of food. You know, we have to, I think, it's not our job to oversee the day-to-day operations of these things, but it is our job to say to the town of Nantucket, we are doing our job when we're allocating the funds. And we have done our research and we have done our work.
We just have to be careful that we're not that we don't look at it like we're invading or we're micromanaging, because the CPC has to be careful with that also.
I'm not saying that we're micromanaging, but when we need to, nobody's asking questions. Nobody's coming up with, it's all about, we can believe in something. Truly, we all believe in something, and that's what we're here for. But there should be questions asked, and where is this funding going, and why are we funding that? And it's only when we ask questions do we get the honest answers. And do we really know that when we're funding something, we're funding it the way that we've been asked to do it, that we've been asked to be the stewards of where this money will go, or that, you know, and when we do that, everybody should, these aren't things that I should be the one finding. I don't mean that meanly. Yeah, I'm doing my work. It's clearly, guys, I'm doing it because I'm finding it, but why is it just that we say, okay, the organization's good and we should fund them? I want us to look at this. I mean, every single entity and every single one we're doing. I've been the biggest supporter of the hospital, but I'm looking at it and saying, well, wait a minute. Here again, we have the CACs. We're not supposed to be funding those, and you have enough money to hire 2.5, have 2.5 social workers. Is it the job of the town to pay for the 2.5 social workers now? You're not offering us the interpreter services that we used to have, that were like 4 people that actually showed up and sat down next to somebody. They get phone calls. We just have to look at these things a little bit with a bigger eye at what we're doing.
Speaking to the hospital question, I think one of the issues that we've had as the contract review committee, that for so long we had Peter there, and he was doing the work of at least 2 people, if not more. And we looked at things, and now, as you just said, the hospital has become much more corporate. And that's particularly one where I think all of us need to look at with a sharper eye.
Yeah, and I think my request of everybody today is actually, I would like you all to go back over and look at these contracts and these budgets. I want you to do that. I think it's what is fair to the process that we're doing, because, and I'm going to request that this budget from this one, and the health and the Interfaith Council go back and relook at their numbers and present us with the proper numbers in each category, as should be stated when giving us a document on both of them.
For their quarterly report or for this year's ask?
Both
Okay.
The quarterly report and the fiscal year 2020 budget that they showed us don't make up. I haven't even gotten to the 2021 because I started the quarterly report, but the numbers don't carry over into columns. It's great to have your line item go across and add up, but when you're combined coming down doesn't add up. Where else are things not adding up?
I think we've had this issue with them before.
We've had issues with this, and that's why I'm asking, like, I would like everybody to go back over and look at these, please, before we go forward any further. and that you have actually can say to me, yes, there's no problem with that budget in front of us. There's no problem with this. I don't have any questions about this. I feel okay to go ahead with the document in front of us and say, from this document, we made these decisions.
I guess my question for you, Dorothy, though, is like, we are in a pandemic and I feel like their budgets are going to change, like if not month to month and quarterly, then maybe week to week. But, you know, this is the first time I'm on this committee. So I just feel like there's no certainty. And so I try to not look at things with green eye shades quite that much. I'm not saying we shouldn't on the whole. My confusion has only been they put in all the services they provide. I want to know what our money is providing. I don't need to actually know every single thing that they do. I need to know what the tax dollars go for. And that's where I think I'm a little confused about some of the grants.
Okay. I think the problem is that the numbers don't make sense. They don't add up. I don't know a college accounting major would done a better job than they do giving us numbers. It's very frustrating that we have to go and sort through all this crap, and they should present it to us in a better fashion. I mean, it's not the first year this has happened.
Right. So I think what I'm saying is I understand where you're coming from, Jill, but we know that we don't know what next year's COVID will do to anybody's budget. They're requesting a certain amount of funding from us. Our job is to know that in the funding and in the way they oversee their funding, period, and their funding sources, that they're fiscally responsible. So I
agree, but I mean, to me, when I looked at their numbers, they were 200,000 in the black. Yeah, I mean, they had like 198. I think I read that right.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's right, because going over these, some of these numbers don't add up. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, so, I know. I was surprised to see that. And I'm like, why are you asking us for any money if you have $200,000 in the black?
Because that'll get them through the rest of the fiscal year. That's why. That doesn't mean it's going to be there in June.
Well, but again, we already know that they're getting other funding from other sources that they haven't, they haven't needed that before, but people are stepping up. Just
this year.
Well,
I know, but they only need the money for when they need it, Linda. They don't need it. It's not some guaranteed business.
Yeah, it is actually, because the fuel assistance, housing, the food pantry, and the rental assistance has been going on for 15, 20 years.
No, I know. I just mean that their numbers are going to go up and down. It's not a.
And they're going up now.
Yeah,
right. I think that Jill is saying that they're going up due to the fact that we have a pandemic going on in the country, and we don't know that pandemic will be here next year.
No, they've been going up every year anyway, because it's the sheer cost of living and how many people are here. So that's a natural. It's like cost of living. It's the cost of living here. But this has been an unusually intense year. Obviously, it's going to be a bad winter.
Yeah, for everybody, it's going to be. For
next year, they're going to go up a little bit again. So they're not going down. They have never gone down.
Yeah, I know. That's not, I just don't think you understand what I'm saying. So I'll just be quiet.
No, Jill, you can. Jill, that is not how I want you to do that. I want you to clarify what you're saying, and Linda, give her a chance to just say it.
You can't. I'm not saying we shouldn't fund them. So let's just start with that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they have a lot of money, and if you have to dial money back from an organization, it seems like they have a lot more resources. Safe Place doesn't have a $350,000 grant that I'm aware of from Community Foundation, or they don't have that kind of pipeline. So I feel like those are important kind of big picture questions for me as I'm understanding the process.
And again, we're talking about next fiscal year, but obviously that's not getting through. But
hold on, Linda. Brooke?
Dorothy, it would be really helpful for me to understand your process for analysis of this and how you go about doing it. And then also, is it possible for us to request these documents in a format that doesn't require me to add up 4,000 numbers to figure out whether their spreadsheet formulas are correct or whether their input is correct? I mean, I'll be honest with you, the volume of some of these budgets is overwhelming in the actual amount of time I have to spend on this. And I think that there's probably other people here who are also busy and doing other things. And so I wonder whether there's a standardized format that we could request on these financial analysis documents that make comparisons less overwhelming than what I think you're doing individually, because you have a skill set and a way of approaching this that works in your thinking that may not work for everyone else. And you know, we have different talents and skills that we bring. And you know, I was a bookkeeper and I'm a transactional bookkeeper, and inputting data and making sure things that I've done reconcile is a skill set I have. But reviewing past financials is a deficit in my experience and the way I do numbers. And so it would be, this is hard for me to go back over numbers that someone else has input and make sense of them. And so it would be really helpful for me to understand if there's a way that you approach it that might be helpful to me to approach it. And also, can we get the information in a more clear form from all these organizations, rather than just taking their QuickBooks accounts and printing us out 7 pages of everything they spend money on that has nothing to do with us. That they can show their
the thing is that when they go over a certain amount of money request, they're required to give us certain documents.
They can also give us a cheat sheet. I agree with Brooke. A cheat sheet would be great, just a single sheet that we can just go right to. And if we need backup, we go into the details. But I'm not a forensic accountant, and I'm never going to I can't balance my damn checkbook. Thank God I can do it online. But I agree with Brooke. I mean, they gave us, obviously they had to give us the financials because it's required. Mm-hmm. But if they can just give us a single sheet of the information, you know, cull it out and just give us one sheet, and then we can go, if we want to, go look at the rest of it. But I agree with Brooke. I don't have time to go through the hospitals, and they got stuff in there that has nothing to do with us.
Right. I'm saying, so Brooke, the way I look at it,
should have a balance sheet attached to it, which is the summary sheet you're talking about.
Yeah, summary sheet. That's all I want. I'm happy with it.
So for me, what is a snapshot of the organization's financial health, which could be reflected in a balance sheet, right?
If the balance sheet isn't correct or the numbers aren't carried over correctly, Brooke, then how are we actually looking at it? They're the ones telling us that, but as I'm looking at this, this is simple for me, and I don't have the skill sets that you have, but I can look over in the fiscal year 2020 and see that, you know, there was in the Nantucket Bank gave them $2,000, but to the total to date column, the $2,000 doesn't show. It does show when we go down the line, but not across the line. That's a simple thing. And this inaccuracy has been going on and all along. So if you take the total to date combined numbers in the column as they did it, they're off. They're off by, if you do it going down the line, it's off by $21,000. So this is on fiscal year 2020. So I think what we're talking about is this is simple. If I can see this, I believe that everybody else should be able to see it. I don't mean that meanly, but I think that a lot of you have skill sets in this that are not my skill set. My skill set is to do the information. And I'm doing, or our committee's job is to make sure that what we're doing is that they're showing fiscal responsibility to us. And some of that is in spreadsheets that we understand. Maybe for next year, we come up with a system, we can, ask what would be the best way to come up with a, overall budget that we can see. But how do we know where numbers are going if this continues to occur? It's those errors.
Well, I'm not going to serve. I can't serve as the auditor for these organizations. I really can't. Like that is not a role that I'm prepared to take or willing to spend the time on. I'll be completely honest with you. Should we require an audit of an organization for whom there have been consistent years of discrepancies that we see, and ask them to hire someone to review and give an explanation? Do we set a limit that if we're finding discrepancies for a certain number of years, they're no longer eligible? Like, I don't know. I didn't take this, I didn't accept this responsibility expecting to be a financial auditor for a bunch of organizations applying for funding. So I don't know how to balance that expectation with the time and ability I have for this role. And
I'm not asking you to be I'm not asking you to audit. I'm asking everybody to just, I mean, if that's that quick that I can see that quickly, aren't there questions that arise to people?
At some point I got to trust the people giving me the information, but
we've learned past years, Linda, right? That isn't true with some of them. And when we go over it, questions come up. This is how we come up with questions. We had that same issue with a different organization that, you know, through our efforts and through getting an audit into their program, revised it and cleaned it up, and they're now looking fiscally quite responsible. You know, so I think that it is part of our job, and it is part of what we, you know, I don't think,
yeah, I'm hearing you ask for help, Dorothy.
I'm asking everybody to get to read what's there, and so that I want you to come back. I want everybody to read them. I think there should be questions coming up on some of these, and they're not all just black and white. And it's our job to look at them. Rachel?
I'm going to send 2 parts of our mission and procedure to Anne to circulate to the group. But I want to send a couple parts of what the grant request packet is. Some of the questions that Brooke has asked in terms of how we're evaluating, or excuse me, how you are evaluating or divvying out the money. I've heard the response be, well, we review the lower agencies and then we sort of go to the bigger ones later and maybe adjust the funding from there. That's not really how the evaluation process is supposed to go. What you should be doing is there's an entire list that's in accordance with the Chapter 12 of the Code of Nantucket that reviews what your evaluation process is. That's part of the actual request packet. Some of these things do include the fiscal responsibility and making sure that the agencies are managerially responsible. I think the makeup of this group has provided with the understanding that not everybody will be able to have those skill sets, but at least somebody or 1 or 2 people on the group will be able to do that evaluation and report it back to the group. And that's why the mixture of the group is as such. It's not expected that every single person can do that evaluation, but it should also be the responsibility of 1, if that makes sense. But there is a level of evaluation. And I think some of the things I'm hearing is that you kind of look at the smaller ones and you go from there. But really what you should be doing is, what is your needs assessment? What are the needs of the community and that you feel are the priority to fund, and then filter it down from there. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the ones that have the higher funding should be cut versus the lower funding. It sort of means in comparison overall with the requests that you've received this year, how do they fit in with your evaluation? How do they fit in with the current community needs? And what are you looking to actually fund or not? So there might be parts of some of the funding that some of the requests have that you don't feel is necessary versus one that might have more of a priority this year than the other. So I'm just saying that it's just a list of what you look at when you're evaluating grant request packet. And there's also a chart of the community needs assessment. I believe last time I did hear Linda mention something like it's tier 1 of the community needs food or whatever. That is on there. It doesn't necessarily mean that's how you have to make decisions, but it might help you guys. So there's level 1, which is basic necessities. There's level 2, which is other fundamental needs. Level 2 is like childcare or elder service, domestic violence prevention, while level 1 obviously is the nutrition, the utilities, the shelter. So maybe that might help when you're looking at these, trying to decide where you filter out the remaining amount that, you know, you can't fund everybody the full amount. So where do you feel the priorities are. And that really should be more what these deliberations are doing, is kind of trying to filter that down and through.
Well, I think that's what I tried to say.
You did. Yep. I mentioned that you mentioned a little bit, but it's not necessarily let's just fund these small ones and then take it from the big ones. That's
no, I think it was more like try to allocate the funding and then see what happens.
Right. And so the other role of this is, you know, if you are seeing the documents that are coming back, that's why we have the quarterly reports, that they're not managerially responsible. They're not fiscally responsible. They're not necessarily utilizing the funding to the best of their ability. There's other grants out there that are providing the service. It's not a service that we should be providing. You know, there's different levels that you look at. And that's why there is the requirement that when they do get outside funding sources or grants, they're supposed to report it to this group within so many days so that you're aware of that and aware what the other funding is. In the past, there has been a request to utilize the funding requested to do a managerial audit. And it seemed like that was a really good thing and ended up being a positive thing in the long run for the agency that was requested, because this group was so on top of looking at their financials and saying something's not quite right. So there is a balance that needs to happen. You know, I'm not trying to guide any of the argument discussion, however you guys want to do it. But I do think maybe seeing that document and just taking a look at that might kind of help answer some of those questions and how you're evaluating these, and then what you're looking at in terms of how you give the funding to each. It's a really hard thing to do. I get that. When you have all these requests, you want to just fund them all, but you have to whittle it down to what the town has allotted you. So I don't know if that helps, if that makes it worse. But I'll try to get those documents and get them to Ann so they can circulate them to you guys.
Great,
Thanks,
Rachel.
I appreciate that, Rachel. So with that being said, does everybody want to wait to be able to read all this that Rachel's going to send forward to you? Would that help? I think so.
Absolutely.
Well, town meeting's been put off till when is it, Rachel? June?
June 5th.
Yeah, there's not the impetus to have to get it in like we do in the past for the April town meeting. Got to get it in next week or by February 1st. There's not that impetus at the moment. So we have time to think about it and review it.
I have to be honest with you. I know that we have town meeting, but I have not heard that from Denise that my date has changed. I'd like to confirm with Denise that my date has changed for the report, guys.
I do have a new updated draft ATM town timeline. I'll see if there's anything that mentions that specifically for you, Dorothy, before we ask, or if Jill knows.
Do you know, Jill?
I can look. We did get an updated list. Give me a second. I'll look. Let's see. I was thinking about it this morning because I was like, oh, we'll get the warrant a lot later than we normally do.
Yeah, because that doesn't close until the 20th.
Hold on, Linda. Brooke was asking a question. Brooke?
Dorothy, it would be hugely helpful for me if you could pare down the things that given your experience at this and the issues that have surfaced before, having a clue as to where you're looking in all of this data, like, would be really helpful to me. Where are you seeing discrepancies? What's your experience? And help focus my thinking and how I'm, looking at these. It would be really helpful for me. That's not to say I shouldn't look at the whole thing. I get it. However, being new to it, it's like, what are the critical elements of the financial health and experience of the organization that have been useful for you guys to look at in making your decision and reviewing them? I've never done this work before, so some guidance would be really helpful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think that some of it has come from input that we've gotten from the members that, that actually look over the budgets for us. The others, you can blatantly see sometimes. We want to know that if, that if something, you know, looking at it, it doesn't jive, that we're paying, you know, somebody's paying $50,000 for this, for, you know, so-and-so, but it's not showing, or it's showing in the wrong column. And are they being fiscally, we're supposed to give money to companies, or sorry, not companies, organizations that are showing us fiscal responsibility. And sometimes it's just, there's something blatantly in there, or a number, an information they might put in the beginning of their grant process doesn't compute as to how can an organization be providing that kind of service to that level? Are there that many people actually, you know, in it? Sort of getting it. I think it's just reading it and going with it's been going with my intuition and knowledge in the community as to maybe what I know. I try to keep in touch with a lot of these organizations throughout the year. I try to, you know, ask around about what's going on, and then I read these, and I try to see whether they make sense. Do they make sense? And then I look at the fiscal things, and if I have questions that might pop up, and I'll look at it and say, well, that doesn't make sense to me, then I ask questions about it to try to figure it out. I mean, I don't think I have any way I could explain it. I'm sorry, but I just can't think. I can't think of a way to make it easy. But if you give me 24 hours, I might be able to think about a way to write it down for you to say, this is how I do it.
Yeah, and I didn't mean on the spot. I meant, you know, like just thoughts that come in your head. And I think to some extent, Dorothy, it's like the first time you do something, it takes you 10 times longer than the next time you do it because it's familiar and you've seen it. And so I just, you know, first time at the rodeo for me. So, yeah. Anyway.
No, and I appreciate that. And I think that's part of the thing. Sometimes it's really hard when it's your new year to feel whether you're asking questions, or if everybody else seems okay with it, maybe you might have questions and you're like, well, nobody else has to, so I'm not going to ask that question. Or you don't understand the history behind the organizations, you know, and that could be, you know, maybe that's something when new members come in, we give a history of an organization, you know, so that they have an idea where we stand when we do things. Bert?
Yeah, last year we were very lucky. We realized, at least I realized this year, we had someone that did all the heavy financial lifting for us last year, and now we've lost her. But her expertise as being the chief financial officer of Siemens, she could look through those numbers and find all the loopholes and find all the mistakes and really quickly for us. And a lot of us didn't have to work very hard at it because she did all the heavy lifting.
Yeah, she did. And she found a lot of stuff that made people go back and come back with true numbers and made us able to look at things better. And it's actually, and then, you know, numbers are a part of it. And then the other part that's really significant is the impact the organization will have on this community as a whole, on every individual in the community, and what the purpose of our funding is all about, you know, or the town funding for this is all about. And like I said, when I go to present, Brooke, I want to present 100% knowing that everything that we're backing, I can honestly, you can ask me a question, I can answer that question for you with not having to look at papers, but knowing that this information I know is true to the best of our knowledge, to the best of the information given to us, and the best of the work that we did to, you know, to say, yes, we're behind this 100% and this is what we want, or we want more money because we know that this is underfunded and this needs funding. Or there was a year when we said we don't want to fund this whole thing because nothing was making sense. So, you know, I think it's, you know, that's the most important thing we're doing, is providing services that are actually being provided, but we are fiscally responsible to every taxpayer in this town for decisions we make. And so it's a fine line sometimes when you want to know that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing within that contract, and they're not spending money ways that they're not supposed to be spending it, especially the tax dollars that are being presented. And when you present tax dollars, that the organization itself is being well managed.
No, I completely appreciate that. And how to accomplish that with my brain is the question. So
well, if I can accomplish it with mine, I think you can with yours, I promise.
We don't all have to see the same thing or see it the same way or catch the same thing. And I don't expect that from any of us.
No,
so,
it shouldn't be. That's what makes it so good. What makes it so good is that it should be such diverse feelings and understandings of organizations that we come in like with a whole different understanding of why it can impact the community in so many different ways. That's what makes it a truly diverse decision based on the best for the whole community. That's what we want.
Well, clearly I'm more of an organic thinker about this stuff and you're more the analytical. So I count on you to find the stuff that you need to tell us we need to look at rather than you asking me to go do what you do and try to find it all, because that's never going to happen. Right. So I rely on your detail-oriented review of those particular little things and then tell me what it is you find. I don't expect all of us to find the same thing or do the same thing the same way, because that's never going to happen.
Never. It can't happen that way. And I think that, you know, Linda, you're on the organic side of it, but I think we're both on the grassroots side of it, of understanding the implications it's had in maybe all of our lives. So, and it's very interesting to, you know, it makes this process even greater when we have compassion and understanding, but we also have to step away from that a little bit in order to do it right. So I think
I'm going to rely on you to find that stuff.
Okay, you can, to the best of my ability. So I think that what we really would be great is, I see Jill's going to ask a question. So Jill, ask your question or make your thing.
Well, I think one of my questions is, because I kind of like to look at how many people were served, right? And I think that's an important question for everybody, like how many people were served, and is that the right number of people for the community based on, you know, the situation we're in, blah, blah. But how do we know that they served those people? I mean, that's the other thing about looking at this. Like, how do we know that 3,000 people really went to the food pantry, you know, whatever it is?
Because you gotta trust that they're giving you the truth, for God's sakes.
I know, but that's what we're having the conversation about.
No, we're having a conversation on, and usually it comes down to, oh, I didn't count that right, or I didn't give you the figure and I didn't carry it over right. That's nothing to do with direct services to the public. They're not lying about that. It's their inability to get a grip on just how to present their figures. And these are all 501c3s. A lot of them are volunteers. It's kind of hard to get them to get a grip sometimes on the numbers. We've been there many times.
I think there is some question, Linda, on numbers and percentages. You know, clearly, Janice herself said, as far as Interfaith Council, was that she used the U.S. Census for her numbers. We know that U.S. Census is not correct. So, you know, it's not that percentage of the community. I think that there is mixed feelings throughout the community on how are some of these organizations able to track really what's going on. And I don't think that those, you know, like I was sent that Facebook thing yesterday by somebody who knows that we sit on this committee. I sit on this committee and I was like, oh my God. You know, I understand where people have their questions about things. And if that's going out in the community, of course, that's the reason the community comes up with questions. So I think that there is some of these organizations can track it by, you know, the services they give as far as one-on-one service to people, because, you know, you see a clinician that's documented, you see a physician that's documented, you see a therapist, you know, these things are documented. But I can see where there's a discrepancy. I think what I'm gonna suggest is that we get right now that we step away from what we're doing, we take a look at what Rachel is sending to us. We all get a better understanding of this, and that we come back next week after our interviews, after understanding it and having a good idea of where we want to go and understanding what our job is as we go forward in the process. That's my suggestion to everybody. So I see that. But I can't make that. Well, I can make that suggestion.
Yeah, we just do it.
Yeah. So does everybody agree on that? Do I get an agree? John?
I agree on this, but I think it is particularly appropriate this year because we do have 2 new members who are also a lot younger than I and have a lot more, but they each have involvement in the community or parts of the community that I don't have a direct view of. I've gained it through these interviews in the past to some extent, and with your help, Dorothy. But I think that it's particularly important for Jill and Brooke to have a chance to see some of the people we're funding, to get just a feeling for how they operate and what their boots on the ground look like.
Yeah, I don't think that's where I need to be brought up to speed. I feel very much up to speed on these human services organizations and what they're doing in the community. That's sort of the financial piece is a lot harder for me, and I need to focus more on it. And and I think this conversation today has been incredibly helpful to me in terms of understanding what the priorities are and where I need to ask for help, and how detailed this process is. I mean, being new, I mean, that's the part I don't understand, I'm not privy to. Like, there's stuff written down, but how it actually plays out in a meeting and what gets prioritized and what's important is, I'm on the learning curve there. So this has been an incredibly helpful conversation for me today. Thank you.
Jill, do you have anything to say?
No, I'm good. I mean, I'm happy to look at the numbers a lot more closely and see if there are those discrepancies. I guess it's just, if there are discrepancies, I don't know that it necessarily means that A, we shouldn't fund them, and B, that they're a bad program. So like I said, I was operating in good faith with these groups. I mean, I don't know the groups. I've worked with the hospital on a grant before. I thought they were, so I have a little experience there, but I'm going to Health Imperatives today, and I do want to find out from them what exactly the money is going towards. That's more important to me, what the tax dollars are going towards. So that's kind of it. Thank you. Thanks for, getting us to focus in on that too, Dorothy. I know that that's absolutely the right thing.
Okay, Bert, anything?
Yeah, whoever, it disturbs me that, like it disturbed you, that thing on Facebook. Who's ever going to visit over at the food pantry needs to.
That's you.
Oh, it's me. I haven't gotten a time or a date yet.
It's
Friday at 3:30.
Yeah.
Right.
What was posted on Facebook? I don't know what this post is. I stay off of that stupid site.
I actually stay off it too, but there was a counter full of food and a box full of food from the food pantry. All items that are on the food pantry's like list of items.
Okay.
And it was posted for free. But I see Rachel's hand.
Why would anybody think that that was a legitimate post in the first place on that god-awful site?
Well, no, it is somebody that got the food that actually was offering it out.
So somebody actually got food from there and then they gave it to somebody else?
No,
they offered the site because they don't eat it. It's not, it doesn't fit into their diet. It's items that aren't privy in their, used in their diet. They call it American food.
Well, they didn't have to get it then. That's what bothers me. You get what you want there. You don't just, here, take this, whether you eat it or not. That's not how the food pantry works. I don't understand that.
I understand it too. But I can only say that somebody sent me this, and well,
we don't even know if it's legit. So that bothers me.
Well,
nothing on that site's legit.
Okay. let Rachel had her hand up, and I'm gonna.
Well, maybe that will just warrant a question when you do visit the agency to say, how do you hand out the food, and be sure that what they're getting is what you want, and then you don't even have to refer to the Facebook. I just want to mention, I'm hearing all of you, and I'm trying to like kind of meld it together. You know, Jill's mentioned that, you know, sometimes she's going on faith and she just wants to make sure that the money that we're providing is going to where it's going. That's where those quarterly reports really come in handy to do the review, because what's listed on the quarterly report for them to report back should tie directly to the services and the funding that you allocated to them. Sometimes they report more, but they only say this is how much was applied, but this is how much of the services we provide. And I think that's where Dorothy then is tying in when the numbers aren't matching. So sometimes in their application, they'll say we served this many people in this many hours and provided this much service, but then their budgets or their prior quarterly reports or things like that, they're not jiving. And sometimes they'll say last year we served this many people, but on the reports that we got, it doesn't say that at all. So, you know, Brooke, you wouldn't have the benefit of having those prior ones. And that's where I think you're saying that you would rely on Dorothy to say, hey, this doesn't jive with last year. But I think that's where it's also important when you're getting these quarterly reports, even though you weren't on the group at the time, to know that that dollar amount was allotted or whatever it was, you can at least see where they're allotting the funding this time to be sure that it's at least in line with the contract, that the funding that they got from the town is being used the way it was indicated and how, and then that would impact how you're approving what you give them this year. So I'm just trying to sort of take all of your comments. I think they're all very valid, but kind of like pull them and tie them together. So I think in a way you're all sort of going about the same way, but different angles, if that makes sense.
See if this makes sense.
With the review of the numbers and how they're providing, yes, you have to sort of go on faith, but if they're saying they're seeing X amount of people, but then their budget is showing this, that's where you're saying something's not right. And then you start asking the questions. And sometimes it's just an error. Sometimes the number was just wrong or they transposed something, and that's fine, but at least they're paying attention. And I will say in the past, this is something that Dorothy and I had worked on, where the quarterly reports didn't go back to this group. They came to the human service director. We kind of vetted them out a little bit and then tried to make sure that they were following the contract. And that's where I started saying, you know, this is really something that this group, this committee should see to be sure that the follow through is there with the agencies. And that also ties into the integrity of them in terms of what you're giving them funding going forward.
Well, you know, one of the discrepancies may be that they've got funding, alternate funding. And if they're giving us the overall, but not all of them is serviced by our money, they're serviced by other parts of the other entities coming in for that service. That's where some of it they may say they service more than that, but they only spent this because they only spent our money on whatever percentage of that service was. So there may be a discrepancy with what they're reporting of their overall business versus what part of it was from our funding. I think sometimes that, and CPC, same thing, that's where there may be a discrepancy.
Or at least and then you know that they have other funding sources, but that's where I think those quarterly reports that you get can kind of also help. So we have the 2 cycles already under your belt, so you can look at them and say, okay, well, we already have 2 quarters, it's half of their last grant year. They've already used this, here's what they're requesting now. And you can kind of see either their increase or decrease in what their usage has been. And yes, it's a lot of analysis. Some are much easier than others. And I think that's where, and Dorothy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or anybody, I think that's where you guys have always sort of divided out the different agencies and visited the different agencies and sort of focused on them, so that you 2 are going to these places, you're looking at those applications more in depth than all of the others, you're asking those questions directly to them, you're reporting it back to the group. I think this year is a little challenging with COVID and how it's set up, but that was sort of my understanding all along, so that you're not taking all of the requests at once and trying to do that fine tooth. But if you 2 are visiting here, you kind of do that more in depth and then bring those questions back to the group. Dorothy just happens to be an overachiever, I'll say, and does it for all of them because she's the chair and she does the report and she's very in tune with this and has been doing it for so many years. But I think that's where my understanding was with the group, that there are different skill sets of different people for a reason, and that you break out the agencies also for a reason. And maybe that helps, not necessarily the burden of the review, but it helps you guys in terms of where you're focusing. But I know it's sort of late in the process, but maybe next year will be a little bit smoother, especially COVID sort of has created some additional challenges for you guys, I think.
Get your vaccine.
Correct. And I think, you know, Brooke, when Rachel talks about the budget, the quarterlies coming in, we had one organization that a quarterly came in and they had on it funding that the town, you know, they were funding something that we were paying for something we had not agreed upon, and we had to actually have it pulled out of there, you know, and have it stopped at our funding, because that was not something we had agreed upon. And so that's why looking at the quarterly reports helps us determine, you know, because I saw that and I went back over it and I'm like, oh, I don't think so. And I went to Rachel. I'm like, Rachel, we're not supposed to be funding this, are we? And she's like, no. So
that's why it's really important that we talked about before about whatever we are funding for all of these guys. Let's say we have to take funding away from several to get that 100 grand off the total. We're very specific about what we're funding, like the CPC. I mean, we listed specifically what we're funding and what we're not funding, because we get into those troubles.
Correct. So I guess what I'm going to go back to, I appreciate the conversation we've had. I'm sorry. I just so everybody know, I got a text from my doctor. I was just responding that I couldn't talk to them. So if you saw me going down, that's what I was doing. I will, I'm still suggesting that everybody read over everything, that we just come back to this conversation after we've had our interviews and after you've been able to read the document that Rachel has sent out. And we can come back into this discussion next week. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah, when's our next meeting?
It is
Friday.
Okay. Friday.
I would rather, if we can hold till next week, because we're visiting Friday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives me the weekend to do my homework.
Okay, is everybody okay with that?
Just skip Friday?
Skip Friday and then we can go in. I think it might make our deliberations more efficient.
Does that work for Ann?
Yep.
Okay.
So
what is our next meeting now?
It's scheduled for Friday at 10 o'clock, but then the next meeting after that is the 22nd at 10 o'clock.
the following Friday, yep. And do we want to get more meetings on the calendar now before?
We have the 22nd. What's the next date?
That was the last one.
Okay, so I think we need to put one more on there, and then from that we'll come up with a date. Because after, I think 2 days on deliberations, and then after that, the report will be written, and then the report is sent out to you all to edit. It's sent actually to Ann first to edit, and then to the rest of you to edit after it's been edited by Ann. And then
what is the 22nd? Is that a Friday?
Yes, next Friday.
At 10?
At 10 o'clock.
Okay.
And then, so do we want to add the following Monday at 10, the 25th?
Ann, can you see if the 25th is open?
Sure. Hold on.
Predicated on whether they will give us the time.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found that out the hard way.
Yeah, it ain't easy, let me tell you. The HDC is missing a couple of meetings a month because other people are in the way, and so the HDC meetings are a nightmare.
When haven't they been a nightmare, Linda?
They're a nightmare all the time, but when you're missing 2 meetings out of a month, that just...
Okay, so Anne, we have down that we're going to meet, the next meeting we're going to have is going to be the 22nd. And after that, we're requesting the 25th.
I'll have to send Eric an email. She's not answering her phone. Yeah, the 22nd, I mean, yeah, the 22nd is all set.
Yep, and then the 25th, you'll make a request?
Yep.
Fabulous, thank you.
And that's for 10 o'clock also?
That's for 10 o'clock also, and then, yeah, and we should be able to have the information so that then we can have our final deliberation on that day, the final funding, and then I'll start the report.
Okay.
And Dorothy, we haven't had a confirmation on the 4 o'clock tomorrow at Artists Association yet. Anne's going to check with them.
Yes, I did get a confirmation this morning.
Okay, so we're set for tomorrow at 4?
We are set for tomorrow.
Okay. Jill had to back out of the, because she has to pick up her daughter from school. I guess they're back. So we're okay for health imperatives, but not for Safe Place today, unless someone else wants to substitute.
Rachel just said bye to all of us.
So we have to reschedule Safe Place.
You have to reschedule Safe Place because who's not available, Jill?
I can't. I've got to get my daughter. My husband's out of town. I'm on my own. So.
And I don't think we got a confirmation back from them either. So it sort of works.
Yeah.
I haven't heard from Jennifer at all.
Okay, so I'll reach out to Jennifer. What works for you guys?
I don't know. Find another time. Doesn't matter. I'm all right all week.
Jill?
Just, it's best to be finished for me before 2 o'clock.
Okay.
Next week is fine. I'd rather not do this week, actually. Really, next week is fine. I can make things work. I have FinCom meetings, but those are usually not till 4 o'clock.
Yeah, and Tuesday I have CPC in the morning, so it won't be Tuesday morning.
Okay, yeah, I've got, that's fine.
And Monday's a holiday.
Yep.
Yeah, so maybe next Thursday.
That's fine. Figure out what they've got open over there.
I'll ask them. Jill and Linda, are you going to do today with health imperatives at 1 o'clock?
Yeah, 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No. And you're going to Zoom it, Jill?
No, I'm going to go. I just didn't know if they wanted to Zoom, so I assumed that's what everyone's doing, but I'll go.
Yeah, no, okay, they're there. Okay.
Okay, just so you know, I did text Denise because I looked at the schedule and there's nothing on there about when your report was due. I don't know. She just said mid-February, date TBD, and she said it won't change.
Okay, mid-February. Great. Okay.
Okay.
So we just jammed you up, Dorothy, didn't we?
Yeah, that's okay. So, okay.
Well, let's all come really well prepared so that your report is written through our deliberations.
Yes, that'd be great.
What are you drinking, Brooke?
What?
Nothing.
Ask Brooke what she's drinking. Thinking, well, I gotta have our deliberations ready. I get it. I need to do my homework.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So everybody,
yeah.
I appreciate the time everybody's put in today. I appreciate the time you will be putting in this coming week. And go with those questions. Try to find out what's going on. I think it's important. And Linda, I will have Anne, or I will send you directly the posting that I saw, if you're the only one requesting it. If everybody's requesting it, we can send it via Anne.
Yeah, was that on the Nantucket year-round community site?
Yes, it was.
I would like to.
And I'm not a member of it, so somebody sent it to me.
Yeah, no, I would like to see it because I know that the food pantry is also involved in the COVID emergency quarantine resource delivery, and they may be operating slightly differently for that because people can't come and select their food because they're in quarantine. So I'm going to the food pantry Friday, so for the site visit, so having it would be really helpful for me in terms of being able to flesh out what happened.
Because the last thing they do is waste food. I'll tell you that. You get what you want. Right. That's it.
Well, I don't think that we're saying that the food pantry itself in its efforts to give food to people are wasting food. It's whether some of the recipients are wasting the food. I think that's the question. It's not whether or not the food pantry itself is doing it, or whether, and I think the question comes up that's been coming up is, and we all know it's very hard, how do you know who should be getting it, who shouldn't be getting it, and what they're doing with it? And that itself, like I said, somebody sent me that yesterday. I am not on Facebook. I've never been on Facebook. I have no idea what goes on in the community page.
It keeps your blood pressure a lot lower if you stay off of Facebook.
I'm going to stay off of it then.
Yeah, it's a horrible page. It's a horrible site. And it's the same 10 people bitching the whole time. I hate to be blunt.
Anyway, Brooke, what?
I don't want to do what people do on Facebook, which is draw conclusions from inaccurate information. So let's do some investigation, find out what's going on, and figure out whether there's a way to address it. As so the problem to me is the perception of the food pantry's work being compromised by what someone may have thought was the right thing to do, something they couldn't or shouldn't eat for dietary reasons. They wanted to have someone else be able to have it, right? That's also a possible explanation for what happened.
Well, I think your first thing, Brooke, may well have hit it on the nose. This may have been a family that was quarantining, and they brought the food to them. They made up the packages for them, and they didn't choose what they got.
Well, I think I think it was delivery for a long time this winter, Bert, that you couldn't go in personally.
Yes. You couldn't go into the food pantry.
But I think what I was trying to say, Brooke, is those things come out and they're out there, and we just have to know the answers to them. So could I get a
motion to adjourn?
Okay, do I have a second on that?
Second.
Okay. Bert.
Yes.
Jill.
Aye.
Brooke.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Linda.
Yep.
Me, yay. Okay, thanks everybody.
All right, Dorothy, send that to me.
I will. I think I'll send it out through and everybody.
Okay.
Who wants it? Just Brooke and Linda?
No,
send it to everybody.
And I'm going to have you send it to everybody. The one I sent.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.